Okay, this is our video about conflict in stories. Every story has a character, and that character has to go up against things. Usually we call the character like the good guy,
Or good girl.
and they're the protagonist, so they go against things. Sometimes it's other characters. We call those antagonists, like the character that's against the protagonist. Sometimes the character goes against nature, sometimes against him or herself, and sometimes against society, like everybody else. So those are the four major types of conflict in stories. So let's look at those in more detail. So there's conflict against a character's self. Um, Usually that's what's called an internal conflict, where the character has a battle with themselves on the inside. And they have to decide who to be.
Or what to do.
And so then, like in A Wrinkle in Time, where Meg has to decide if she's going to be afraid or if she's going to be brave. Or in Peek, where Peek has to decide what kind of person is he going to be. Is he going to be selfish and think only of himself, or is he going to think of other people? So that's character versus self. Another type of conflict is character versus character. That's the classic good guy versus bad guy thing, or good girl versus bad girl. Harry Potter is a great example of that one, where Potter goes against Voldemort. Other examples in literature are Jim versus Long John Silver, the pirate in Treasure Island. And what's great about that is the character who's the antagonist sometimes changes and becomes the friend of the protagonist. There's also a good example in Matilda, where Matilda goes up against Mrs. Trunchbull. And she sort of has to have that conflict. There's other examples too, like in The Big Dark, in Everest, and many, many other stories. So that's character versus character. So another type of conflict is character versus nature. And that's when there's natural elements or like natural obstacles that the character has to overcome, and they go up against nature, and
They have to survive.
so it's sort of a survival thing. A classic example of this type of conflict is in Hatchet, where Brian has to survive in the wilderness sort of on its own. It's just him against the natural world. There's a great example of this in Pax, too, when Peter has his journey through the woods. Other examples are the 21 Balloons, when Sherman goes against the elements and tries to survive his balloon journey. There's also a case in character versus nature sometimes when it's like against the universe or even against machines, sort of fits under that category. And then the last one is character versus society. And a lot of times that's one character versus a whole bunch of other characters.
What's their goal?
Well, a lot of times the goal is to correct an injustice or make something right that's not right with the society. So a good example of this is A Long Walk to Water, when Salva tries to make things right in his world. There's also The Diary of Anne Frank, a classic example of sort of one person trying to make things right in the world. The Hunger Games, Savvy. There's lots of other examples of sort of one person versus a whole bunch of other people, or a normal thing that they're trying to change and make right. Maniac Mickey is a great example too, if you ever get a chance. So there are the four major types of conflict: character versus character, character versus self, character versus nature, and character versus society.